Hello, Alton from microgrinder.com, back again with another free League Finder review video for one of my students on Udemy. Today what we'll be doing is doing his free 20-minute League Finder review for Xenolot. He is playing 4 tables of 5NL 6 max on PokerStars, and he's enrolled in my Crush Microstakes online poker course on Udemy. Now those of you that are watching this video on YouTube, I offer free 20-minute League Finder review videos for my students that are enrolled in my Udemy courses. If you're interested in checking out those courses, check out the description bar below this video and you can learn about the courses. You can click on the links and find out more about them. So anyways, let's go ahead and get started with his video. So while there's a bit of downtime, my first recommendation is, if possible, find a different site to play on. Typically in general, even at the microstakes, PokerStars is a more difficult game to beat. There's a lot more regs at the table, and if you look at the stats, there's a lot of taggish and laggish stats here. Not too many bad players. And you know, if we just look at the stats in general, if I pause the video, this guy is a 36-14, so you know, he's a bit of a semi-loose passive. This guy looks like a tag. We have an unknown here. We have a player here that looks to be, I don't know how many hands because I don't use PokerStars, but he's a 22-0 after a small sample, so he looks to be fairly tight. This player looks to be a fish, so that's good. Here, this player looks to be a tag. This player looks to be a lag. We have another tag over here, another tag here. A lag here, an unknown that's playing like a nit. We have this player maybe a fish. I think it's only have 5 hands on him, so we can't even really look at his stats. 18 hands on this player. He looks to be a bit of a laggish, but could be a tag. It's a small sample size. Another tag over here, and then another nitty tag here. So in general, not that many fish, not that many bad players on PokerStars. And from what I've heard from other coaches that work with players on PokerStars, they recommend that they get off PokerStars, they go to a softer site like 888, and they're able to increase their win rate drastically. So that's my first recommendation, is find a softer site because you're going to make a lot more money at the microstakes and move a lot quicker. Let's go ahead and look at the deuce 4 down here. It looks like you are not clicking the insta-fold. With deuce 4 suited in the small blind, I'd just be insta-folding this. I wouldn't be looking at the big blind stats. It looks like he doesn't have any, you don't have any stats on him whatsoever. And in regards to steals and fold to steals, and you decide to limp. So I don't like the limp. If you think that he's going to fold to a high percentage of steals, you can go ahead and steal, but it looks like you don't have any stats on him for that. Now, if you don't think that he's going to fold to steals, just get rid of the deuce 4 suited. It's just a bad hand. You don't want to be playing it out of position, blind versus blind. And then when you you do limp and you end up hitting the baby flush, I think you could lead out as a semi-bluff on that flop, since he's folding to 75% of c-bets there. 7-8, I think that the call and the defend is fine versus a small blind open. And then I like you going for some thin value here on the river. And in regards to the bet sizing, you probably could even just made it 5 cents. You could have made it 1 big blind to get him to call. But going for 2 big blinds for pot size bet, I think is fine, just because there's really not much in the pot. He may call you down with as light as a pair of queens there. 7-8 suited here, I think it's just an insta-fold. Don't even need to really look at his stats. You have bottom pair with the low end of the straight draw, so I just fold. Jack 3 off, like the fold on the button. So it looks like we're getting a bit of action. Looks like the games move fairly quickly on PokerStars. Like the open with the queen 9 suited, 3x is fine on the button when we're playing 5NL. I think once we move it to 10L, we consider doing 2.5x or 2x instead of a 3 times a big blind. So far opening ranges look pretty good other than limping the 2-4 suited. Like the 3-bet here. And I like the sizing since you're out of position. So far, everything's looking pretty good. I'm glad that you're really disciplined for the most part with your opening ranges and folding and not limping a lot in the blinds, other than that one hand. Now, Queen 7 suited, I think this is a bit loose. And one thing I want to talk about too, and let me back up the video a little tiny bit. So let's go ahead and take a look at your opening range here. So earlier down here, you made it 3 big blinds from the small blind, and now on these two tables here, you made it 2.5x opening from the small blind, and 2.5x here opening from the small blind as well. My recommendation is that when you're opening from the small blind, just make it 3x in general. If you are stealing from the cutoff or the button, you can make it 2.5x. Typically, the only place that I make it 2.5x myself is on the button. Everywhere else, I make it 3 times a big blind. So with that said, I think this is a bit loose. I'd probably be folding this since in general I recommend a fairly tight cutoff opening range, and my small blind opening range is typically my cutoff opening range. So I think this is a bit loose. I would fold this from the small blind unless you had a really good reason to, and it looks like this guy is folding to 100% of the steals if I'm reading this correctly. And if he is folding to 100% of the steals, then I think that opening here is fine. But I think the sample size of hands are fairly small, so we have to take that into consideration. And then same thing with the King 7 offsuit. Again, a bit of a loose open from the small blind, but again, it's really dependent upon how often your opponent is folding to steals. And it looks like this opponent was folding to 100% of steals as well, and you have 52 hands on him. So it looks like you're taking a look at your opponent's stats. Glad you're doing that. Queen 10 suited, yeah, good fold there. This guy is playing a fairly tight range. He was playing a 19-13 at that time, so that's an easy fold there for following the gap theory. So pretty standard folds here. One thing I would recommend doing, I noticed that you're looking at a lot of your opponent's stats. I would recommend starting to take notes as well. Once you get into some sticky type of situations, or you see something a bit fishy, like that you're tagging your opponent. So you're tagging, you're looking at their HUD stats. Also, you know, whenever you get a chance, whenever you see them making an odd line, something that doesn't make sense, then, you know, also take some notes on them. I like the flat with pocket eights there. And I like the fold. There's really nothing else you can do there. Like the open on the button with the 5-7 suited. That's good and open there. Good hand to open on that position. Looks like you're going for a 3-bet with the 10s. Not a huge fan of 3-betting here, and let me go ahead and pause the video. And I'll let you know why I'm not a huge fan of the 3-bet here. This guy, I know it's a small sample, but he's playing a 17-17, so he's playing a bit of a tight range. You don't know much about him. He's a full stack, and he's opening for 4x in the cutoff. Now, assuming in general that we think that the players are decent on PokerStars, when he's opening to 4x, he probably has a stronger range than if he's opening 3x. So when you 3-bet him with pocket 10s, you have to have a plan to how you're going to react to a 4-bet. And pocket 10s put you in a really tough spot. It's like playing a pair of 9s or a pair of jacks, where if somebody 4-bets you, what are you going to do? Well, you know that getting in probably isn't good, because you're probably going to be up against something like queens, kings, or aces, and at best you're going to be coin flipping with ace king. So in position, I would actually just like to flat here, because we don't know much about him. He seems to be fairly tight, and he's making a 4 big blind raise. And if we flat, maybe we can get Honky to come along, or we can get this opponent to come along as well. But, you know, since you did 3-bet, I do like the sizing. I like that you made it a bit smaller because you are in position. So let's go ahead and see how the hand plays out. So it looks like he's pondering what he wants to do. And he does make the call. And this puts you in a pretty good position here because he can easily have something like Ace King in his range. Or he could be playing, you know, pair queens, pair jacks. So you might get a call. The great thing is that you have this board crushed. And in a 3-bet pot, I don't expect something like Queen Jack to be in his range. I would consider checking this flop, but I think betting it's fine because Ace King is definitely in his range as well for flatting a 3-bet. So I like the sizing around half pot size bet. You don't need to make it too big. And then on the turn, I think your sizing here is a bit too large. So let's pause the video. So you pretty much have this board crushed. And if he has something like Ace King, then he's only drawing to a king or an ace. So there's 4 aces and there's 1 more king in the deck. So they give him 5 outs, only has around 10% equity. You're going to win 90% of the time if he does have trip kings there. So if we think about it from that perspective, you want to easily get the money in on the river, and you want to bet amount that you think that he's going to call. So, you know, if you bet just over half pot size bet, you can easily get everything in on the river. If, for example, he called the flop with a pair of queens or a pair of jacks, he might be tempted to fold the turn if you bomb the turn as well because he thinks you're going to have trip kings or maybe you have a full house. So let's go ahead and continue with the hand. Like the fold with the 9-7 off. Glad you didn't call there, out of position in the big blind. And he does jam, and he ends up jamming with jack. So yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I didn't like the 3-bet, because if he 4-bet you and you called it off, then you were facing jacks, and he was roughly an 80% favorite. So, you know, that's why I like flatting instead and set mining and trying to, you know, flop a set versus something like aces, kings, queens, or jacks and stack them. But you got lucky that time and it worked out. But, you know, if you raised pre-flop, it would have put you in a sticky situation. So the king 10 off, I like the defend there. And if we think about the sizing here, you are, you know, he is putting 15 cents into 45. So you're getting 3-1. You need to be right around 25% of the time. If you call here, you don't have a club, so you have 3 outs for the straight with the queen. And then you have a king as an over, so that gives you another 2. So you have 5 outs, gives you around 10% equity. If you don't think that you can get more money out of him with implied odds, I think folding here is the correct move. Looks like you made the call, so the only reason that I would call here is if you're floating to take away on the turn with a bluff, and I'm glad that you did that. If you weren't planning on taking that line, if you're planning to play the hand just for implied odds, hit the straight, then I like a fold instead because you're not getting good pot odds there. And being in position, you may not have good implied odds as well. Pocket eights. Go ahead and see what you do. Like the call. And yeah, the fold's pretty standard there. So then I'm glad that your video included 4 tables because we're able to get ample amount of action in such a small period of time. And looks like you're considering 3-betting him. I like this 3-bet simply because you have a blocker to a King X hand, and he's folding to 88% of 3-bets there, and you have a decent sample size of hands on him. I also think that King Jack is good enough to flat as well, considering his range and the cutoff is fairly wide, but I also like the 3-bet. So pocket jacks, I think I would probably flat here. Let's go ahead and pause this video. So again, we have an under the gun raiser raising it to 4x. We have 56 hands on him. He looks to be a bit of a lag, but I still suspect that his under the gun range is fairly strong. And again, with pocket jacks, you know, if you 3-bet there, he's going to fold all the weaker portion of his range, and he's going to raise with the stronger, and he's going to call with, you know, the semi-strong, like the ace king, the ace queens and jacks, and types of hands like that. So given that, you know, he is opening to 4x, I would just flat with pocket jacks on the button, and we might get one of these opponents to call as well. And this is a tough spot. This is why I like flatting, because when he 4-bets you here, you get put in a really tough spot with jacks, and you pretty much are forced to fold there. And let's go back and look at his sizing and look at the odds that he was giving you. He made it a really big 4-bet as well. He made it 3x your 3-bet. So, you know, at this spot, you're pretty much forced to fold. So that's why, you know, when you see somebody raising big from under the gun or raising from early position, then, you know, from late position with a hand like jacks or 10s or 9s, just go ahead and flat. You don't always need to be 3-betting that hand, because this type of hand where you want to get post flop, try to spike his set and try to stack him if he has a pair of aces, kings, something like that. But with that said, you know, it's fine to 3-bet jacks, but, you know, look at the positions, look at their HUD stats, look at their opening ranges from those positions, and then consider, you know, what you should be 3-betting with, kind of like you did with the King Jack suited versus the cutoff open over here. So let's go ahead and see how this ace queen hand plays out, and then we'll go ahead and conclude this video. We are getting close to 18 minutes, so I want to make sure we'll let it run for another 30 seconds, and then we'll go ahead and sum up his video and his League Finder review. Jack King suited. I'd probably just fold this under the gun. I think it's a bit too loose to be opening under the gun, because there's really no bad players at the table for the most part. They're all decent players. You're going to find yourself in a reverse applied odds type of situation a lot of the time. And then in this situation, I don't think you can ever fold here getting the odds that you're getting. I would flat here simply because it's only 15 more cents into a 50-cent pot. So you're getting really good pot odds there to try to suck out, try to hit the flush, try to hit the straight, try to hit 2-pair. So I would have flatted there, given that it was a min raise. So let's go ahead and watch how the King 10 plays, and we'll go ahead and conclude the video. So let's go ahead and pause this. So couple things to work on with your game. Overall, pretty solid game. I liked your opening ranges. I saw one hand where you limped in the small blind with deuce 4 suited. With that hand, you're either opening it to exploit your opponent because he's folding to a lot of steals, or you're just folding that hand because it's too weak. In general, in your small blind opening range, it's a bit loose. I'd recommend you tighten that up a little bit, especially when you're playing against good opponents, unless tons of people are just folding to something like 70 or 80% of steals in the big blind. Then you can open wider. And then also, you know, just take a look at hands where you're 3-betting versus where you can consider flatting as well. A good example was the pocket jacks versus a 4x under the gun raise where he ended up 4-betting you. Another one was a pocket 10s versus a pocket jacks. That one ended up working out for you, but you would have been put in a tough spot there if he decided to 4-bet you with the 10s, just like it happened with your jacks. So in certain situations, it's good to just flat. In other ones, you know, you can 3-bet. But overall, really solid game. I liked your play. Also recommend checking out other sites, because if you play against softer opponents, your win rate's going to go up. Don't need to be playing on PokerStars. There's a lot of other sites out there, and that's my other recommendation. But overall, solid player at 5-0 on PokerStars, doing a good job. Great job at the tables, and thanks for watching. If you have any questions, let me know. It's been Alton with microgrinder.com. We'll see you at the next video.